So for now, I will stop and I am going to hand over to our first group of speakers this afternoon. We have Amy, who is going to lead this in conversation with Catherine Reinhardt, who is the facilitator of the Collective Mending Sessions project based in Iowa, USA. Welcome, Catherine. Good to see you. And we also have Gemma Bagley, Lauren Foster, Kim Mason, and Holly Hughes from the Friday Creatives Project at the Wellbeing Cafe Project in Loughborough in the UK. So Gemma, would you like to say hello so we can find you to spotlight you?
I'll unmute myself. Classic, yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Hi, Gemma, good to see you.
Hi, and Lauren's also here. I don't think Holly, I've just been scanning the participants. I don't think Holly's joined us. I didn't think she may not have been able to. So if she turns up, she can hop on.
Okay, that would be wonderful. So hi, Lauren, great to have you with us too.
Hi. I think Kim's here too. Kim Mason? Kim,
yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Great.
Wonderful. So I shall step out and hand over to Amy.
Thank you, Emma, and welcome everyone. We passed the first test of managing to pin you so that we can see each other all at the same time. So yeah, that's the first step. So it's really nice to see you. So yeah, we've got a little bit of time to have a conversation that builds on the great presentations that Gemma and Catherine put together for us about your different projects, different worlds, different things going on, but also really nice connections in terms of, you know, people exploring and connecting with each other through making textiles. So if we can start, if I ask Gemma, I'm interested in the relationship between process and product.
I think that it's a process and product. It's something we think an awful lot about in participatory arts. We get people together, and the journey people go on when they're making, the zone they get into is very beneficial. And we don't want to push people too much towards having a product at the end, because it's about the experience. It's not about designing and making something to order. It's about just enjoying the process, the mindful process. But it's occurred to me that the product is becoming more important in lockdown, because while the group hasn't been able to meet together, we've been co-designing work. Everybody's been working on their own, and I've been collecting it all in by various means and curating it into a window display. So making a group, so the work represents the group. The piece that everybody's made represents them in a public place for everybody, almost as if to say, hey, we're still here, we're still a group, even though we can't meet together at the moment. And originally they were conceived as bunting, but they've turned into textiles panels, which kind of harks back, I suppose, to solidarity banners and the idea of banners and groups. And yeah, so that's how it's developed, really.
That's great. I can really see that kind of, we're still here, you know, visualizing. And Sally in this morning's session was talking about the yarn storming projects that she was in the park, and the value of participants be able to go and say, like, look, there's my bit, and like, oh, I like that one, you know, kind of spotting your work. Exactly. I wondered whether Lauren and Kim, whether you had any reflections on the experience of taking part in the project, or the things that you'd made, and kind of sharing that.
I'll let you go first, Kim.
No, it's okay, you can go.
Okay. Before I joined in with the activities last year, I really hadn't done much sewing at all, other than mending a few items. I'd attempted to when I was younger, and it hadn't really worked out. But during the lockdown, I really felt like I needed to try something new. And I'm quite surprised at the results, to be honest. And I do like working to a goal. If there's some if I know there's a theme, and you know, the these, like Gemma says, if there needs to be a finished product, I will get it done in time.
Yeah.
Maybe just having loads of stuff around me and looking at it and not having a clue what to do with it, really, because I'm just probably from being overwhelmed by ideas and not knowing which one to pick. And can I just say the other thing I've noticed? I'm a writer, and over the lockdown, the past year, I've really struggled with writer's block. But doing artwork, especially the textiles work, seems to free up the writer's block as well. And I wonder if it's because you're getting everything out with the stitching.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. Kim, how about you? What was your experience?
Well, I found getting involved in art. I haven't done art I got my art degree, but I didn't do any artwork at all. But by being involved in the group, it's got me to get involved in it again and produce, because there's a deadline. It gets me to want to finish it, and I'm actually work better when I'm stressed. So when I've not got much time, I seem to get it done quicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's given me more purpose to get something finished and something to feel proud of. I always like working towards something, and then it's like a therapy when you've finished. Thinking,
really good to see the thing that's come out.
It's quite it's therapeutic, I think.
Thank you. That's really great insight into your experiences. Catherine, I'm seeing a nice link with your project, because it was really evident from the presentation that you did for us that the act of mending the textile really felt symbolic for many of your participants, that, you know, they spoke really, really nicely about that in the bits that you captured. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, just to emphasize, like, during the conversation, I really did want to sort of expand this idea of mending to our communities, and how can mending, the physical act of mending, translate into different ways to engage with our communities, and with how divisive the US is right now politically and on many levels. It felt especially important. So I'm just going to read some more responses. I mean, watch the video. The participants have such gold in their minds. So, talking about product versus process, one of the things I really enjoyed was just their thoughts. And I was really intentional to ask, how to give them prompts to lead into thinking about mending in a larger way. So I will just read some of the responses. So I asked, what's the value of repair practically and metaphorically? And one of the participants, Camille, I love this. Repair requires time and patience, a slowing down to notice. When we're wired for repair, I love that bit, we can better pay attention to our own selves, seeing how we can better take care of our loose ends and fraying bits. In doing so, we become more aware of those around us and are given the tools of patience and listening to know how to best serve our communities. And then a lot of people talked about renewing an object and giving it a new sort of place in time. Another participant said, its history is allowed to continue. It allows for something ordinary or something overlooked to be seen and valued again. And so, and even just in all the sessions, we took a long time, and I really encouraged people the first month to not even stitch on anything. So they would receive a damaged textile, and all we would do is we would look at what was broken. And I think that is a really helpful way to approach any kind of thing that needs mended, like in our own selves or in our relationships with others or in our communities. and people really kind of hated that. And then, 2 weeks in, like started loving just sitting with the broken thing.
Even in the quotes that you were reading out, they were kind of instantly metaphorical as well as practical. That, that kind of, so many of the statements, you can relate it very much to a textile, and also, as you say, to relationships or communities or kind of life much more generally. It really kind of demonstrates the link between the textiles and the wider context. Gemma, you're nodding. I wonder whether this idea of
it's like slow movement, isn't it? It's like taking time to slow down, and maybe we need to have that when we're making textiles. So many people have got bad experiences, been forced to do sewing and textiles at school, and there's lots of people in the group that have been very, very unconfident about it, and with lots of coaxing. And Holly, who was going to join us, she was really kind of anti-sewing, and I really had to kind of coax her through. But even on a Zoom a couple of weeks ago, she was stitching these beautiful words, and she was sort of almost still saying, I find this difficult, I can't do this. And we were watching her just kind of like stitching mental health awareness frantically onto this thing. And when she'd done it, it was like, but you've done it. So I think there is a bit of a mental block. And if we've got the time, maybe we've had the time in lockdown, maybe we've kind of had time to take a look at ourselves and the world and pick things up, and enjoyed that kind of maybe slowing down possibly, or maybe just been immersed in our domestic environments, and we've been able to pick things up and reevaluate things and look at things more closely, maybe. I don't know.
Kim and Lauren, I'm wondering whether, I don't know what your experience, how you got involved, but has taking part at that sense of kind of joining with other people?
I was actually joining with other people. I liked the fact that you post your work on the group and people make comments, and it's what encourages me to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because, it gives what I'm doing purpose, and it gave me confidence.
That was lovely. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's encouraging. It is nice to share work and look at other people's work as well. And I do really enjoy looking at other people's work. And especially when you're not, there's not been any galleries open or not been able to participate any other way.
Yeah,
it's been great.
That's great. I'm going to spring a surprise question on Gemma and Catherine just before we finish, because from my own curiosity, I'm wondering what happens next. So if we go Gemma first, what's next for you?
The Wellbeing Cafe project are very much everybody is thinking about next steps. Do we go back to face-to-face again? Do we carry on doing virtual stuff? And I think it will be very much a blended thing, but we are starting face-to-face sessions soon, and in a very small way. We've already got our next project, which is based on our Memories of the Seaside in the summer. So we're going to be making gigantic lollipops and seagulls and various other things for our window for the end of June. So we've got this rolling kind of offer going on. But yes, we're hoping to get back to face-to-face sessions soon, but there's going to be a blended offer going forward, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gemma. And Catherine, how about you? What's next?
Yeah, the collective mending sessions, well, my vision has sort of expanded. Eventually, I would love to mend like 10 quilts over 10 years and take them on a traveling exhibition. And anyway, but the more recent plans is similar to Gemma. I'm really excited to get together with people in person. The big task I have as sort of the facilitator and artist is during lockdown, I cut up these quilts and sent them out, and now I'm receiving, so I have 2 cut apart and stitched on quilts that I have to reassemble back into an art object, which is at the same time amazingly exciting and kind of terrifying. So I will be attempting to do that with, my fellow menders who are in my community. But I'm also looking for venues. We have 3 quilts now, and I would love to start, exhibiting them. I don't know, yeah, in a new place.
Good call out, and do both of you do share, Instagram links or anything like that in the chat. I'm sure people would like to see what comes next. Okay, so Emma, are you about to pop up now? Is that what happens next?
I am. I will pop up.
Okay, I will unspotlight our speaker. So thank you so much to, I was jumping around. Okay, thank you so much to Catherine, Gemma, Lauren and Kim. Yeah, that was great.
So inspiring. That was so inspiring. I want to do so many things. But for now, I am going to hand over to our next presenter, Sarah Green. Sarah will be talking to us about the group that she's been working with for several years now, Mancraft. And just a heads up, Sarah has an unusual musical introduction to her presentation this afternoon. So sit back, enjoy, and if you've got your stitching to hand, feel free to have a go.
11th of October 2016. Eric's arrived and joins Kenny in the workshop room. He's brought a new gadget with him, a Bluetooth speaker. As the sounds of music lift upstairs, Stan and Kyle are called from the rafters to join in the evening's activities. I weave in and out of the bodies to thread up the needles, fetch the fabric and check the sewing machine, chatting as I go. And then, without warning, the music explodes into the room and a party suddenly ensues, and my colleagues arrive in the doorway, faces flushed with concern. Gemma's hands are wet from dishes and James is brandishing a tea towel, and they are greeted with the full force of the lads' rendition of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. And all I notice in that moment is the sewing, as it continues flamboyantly in tune with the music. I glance at my colleagues apologetically, feeling a bit sheepish and confused. This was not the usual calm, relaxing atmosphere I was used to in textile craft workshops, but I was also slightly thrilled by the response. So, hello everyone, and thank you to Emma and Amy for organising all of this. It's been brilliant so far. And I just hope everyone enjoyed that really sort of slightly odd musical introduction, and I hope you could hear it. And that little snippet that I just read out was from a journal, and I hope that shed a little bit of light on the reason for the music and a bit of light on the energetic and exuberant nature of the workshops I'm going to talk about this afternoon. So to more formal introductions, my name is Sarah Green, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about Mancraft. So Mancraft was a textile craft group that I set up just for men, and I established it back in 2016 as part of my practice-based PhD research. So the research that I did examined the wellbeing benefits of participatory textile crafting for men who might be experiencing vulnerabilities. Now, the group took place once a week, every Tuesday, between 4 and 6 p.m. at a local arts organisation based in Loughborough called Charnwood Arts. Introduced in the extract I read out right at the beginning were the main participants of Mancraft. This included Kenny, Eric, Stan and Kyle. And they've all been given pseudonyms to protect their identities, so these are the names that I've given them for the research. Now, even though the group reached several men, these 4 participants really shaped the research and the practice, and they developed it into this sort of energetic and musical space for creativity, but it was also full of conversation and comedy, and it really became a space and a place that adhered to their needs. Now, at the time of the workshop, on the 11th of October in 2016, I thought the music was, that musical interlude was going to be rare. I didn't expect it to carry on, but it became the norm. So we had loud music, DJing, music games, singing, and even dancing became as regular to the workshops as the sewing did. 7th of March 2017. Kenny and Carl were discussing Carl's work. They were reminiscing about a time not that long ago when he couldn't do a stitch on his own, to his current happy dance sewing for his most ambitious work yet, a wall hanging or bedspread. As if on cue, Stan appeared, dancing his way into the room as the cheesy 80s anthem lifted its sounds above our heads. He danced his way over to the pieces of felt he'd picked out earlier and started positioning other bits of felt on top. Positioning and repositioning, the fabric, like his body, dancing on the spot, always moving. So in order for you to get a sense of how the lads viewed and experienced the Minecraft group, I'm reading out extracts from an observational journal that I wrote as part of my research practice. So I wrote the journal at the end of each workshop, and it captures the repeat encounters and interactions between the participants and the materials and the processes that they engaged with, and then also my facilitation methods as well. So when writing the journal, I tried to pay particular attention to the meaning that the participants described to their own experiences, to understand them and to record them as authentically as I could. So this presentation is going to be mostly made up out of extracts from this journal. And as I read them out, please try and imagine the loud music that would continue to permeate nearly every workshop. So the participants were always very vocal in workshops, and they spoke openly about their experience vulnerabilities or any difficulties they might be experiencing. So for example, I rarely get the chance to talk to other people. A lot of the time, people struggle to understand me. Oh wow, this might be a bit too complicated for me. Well, I remember how reluctant you used to be about cutting anything out, and you were even reluctant to start sewing, I think. Yeah, my hands would shake as well. I didn't want to do anything. Why was that, do you think? Was it nerves? Yeah, I was nervous about getting it wrong, you know, because at school, if you got things wrong, it was pointed out and teachers made like a huge big deal out of it. And when you're dyslexic and you've got anxiety and depression, it doesn't help. And then when you add ADHD onto that, you know. So the participants revealed through the practice how they could sometimes feel misunderstood or they'd feel isolated, and they often worried about making mistakes. So I'd like to just demonstrate how the participants countered these worries and these vulnerabilities through the practice. So I'm going to begin with exploring the relationship to textile craft materials and processes. So initially, the participants had no knowledge of textile crafting processes. When I first set them off on a simple drawing with thread exercise to help them get the hang of stitching, I soon realised that I'd overlooked the very basics. They didn't know how to thread a needle. But they soon made progress, and before long, what was it that made you realise you could do it, you know? So when I stopped thinking about it, you know, it was like when you were showing me that crochet thing, and it was hard, and then I wasn't thinking, but then you were like, oh, where did all that come from? And I've been doing it whilst I wasn't thinking. And soon after that, the participants began to notice the more therapeutic effects of their engagement with textile craft processes and the materials that they were using. 31st January. Kyle suddenly lifted up his work with a flourish and showed me with a gleaming smile, I finished it whilst we were talking. You know, it's like playing Minecraft. Your body switches off and you can let your mind wander. Only your hands are doing something instead of just pressing buttons on a control. 25th of April. Kyle explained how he sometimes zones out when stitching. You know, that's when I get the most done because I'm not distracted, I'm just doing. As soon as I start thinking about it, I end up stabbing myself with the needle. 5th of September. I like sewing. I actually find it therapeutic. I know it sounds weird, but it's like building the coils for my vape, so just do it without thinking. Now, as the practice progressed and the participants got comfortable with the stitching and the projects that they were working on, stories and narratives began to emerge. And this was as a direct result of their engagement in textile crafting, the processes and materials. And it was particularly significant because it was only textile crafting that triggered these autobiographical storytelling for the lads, even though they'd taken part in other creative activities during extended arts weeks. So they'd done sculpture, mosaicing, drawing, painting, digital art, but it was really was the textile crafting that brought out this autobiographical storytelling. 31st of January 2017. The black and grey pieces of felt Cal had finally decided on were a little crumpled, and I spotted him trying to smooth them out on the radiator. Think you need to iron those? Get me an iron then, and I will. I know how to iron. My grandma taught me. So I did, and he did. But as he did, he told me a story, all about his mischievous activities as a cadet, particularly the time when he was congratulated for his very smartly ironed uniform, which was the result of using a normal-sized iron in the washroom instead of the regulatory travel iron that the rest of his platoon had to use. He told me how he had to sneak his uniform out to the washroom, complete with sneaking actions that made us all laugh. He did explain later, though, that he'd owned up to the deception. But rather than get disciplined, he was complimented on using his brains by his commanding officer. Now, the part of the Minecraft practice that I think has been of greatest significance for me is the sense of ability and empowerment that the participants gained from learning new skills and from socialising with each other as well. 27th September. Kyle was making great progress on his sugar skull this week, so I thought I might introduce a new stitch if he was willing. I taught him backstitch. I realised how quickly he understood the process when I was explaining how the stitch worked. So you go up through the fabric, slightly in front of your last stitch, and then, oh, you go back on yourself. He was so chuffed that he'd got it. He took to the new stitch easily, and before I knew it, he'd completed the sewing. He was so happy that he'd done so much, and particularly that he'd learnt a new stitch in the process. I did it! Learnt it! He squealed in delight over and over, waving his sewing in the air and showing everyone in the room. I did it! "19th of July. You know, I've learnt loads doing this group. Loads that I never thought I'd even try. When I was younger, I couldn't even cut things out. My hands had no, he rotated his hand in the air. Dexterity. But now I can cut out shapes, I can draw and sew. I've learnt the beginning of crochet. And you've learnt to do free machine embroidery. Yeah, can't believe I've learnt so much. It doesn't feel like I've been doing it that long. After a conversation about his progress in the group, I noticed him cutting shapes out without templates, doing it by eye instead. Kenny also noted this fact himself. You know, I've just noticed. It's like using the same observing that you do with drawing. It's like the same skill. I didn't realise that till just now. So, learning new skills through the Minecraft group really gave the participants confidence in their abilities, and it adjusted not only their own, but also other people's perceptions of their ability to do things. 9th of January 2018. I gave that phone case to my mum. Oh, good. Did she like it? Yeah, actually. She loved it. The colours and everything. She was really impressed with it. All of my family have been impressed with what I've been doing here. I've been getting really positive comments on that. Only now everyone wants me to make them a phone case. So my final extract for you today highlights just how important Minecraft was to the participants, both as a place to stitch and socialise, but also as a bit of a sanctuary and a space for recovery from a world which can often be overwhelming. "11th of July. Carl turned up at 2. I was expecting him early, but not quite so early. The group normally only starts at 4. That was my first clue as to his mood. He found me outside talking to a Rawrat member, and he engaged in the conversation with his customary gusto, but his comments were clipped and tinged with a slight cynicism. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, not an unusual gesture for Kyle, but the rapidity with which it occurred now was setting off alarms. Something was bothering him. I asked him how his day had been. The dam broke. He vented. I listened. As the conversation began to wind down about 2 hours later, with a few sighs, his shoulders sagged and his speech slowed. The tension was relieved, and I could see that he was tired. Considering his day and his sense of anxiety and stress, I was unsure whether he'd feel up to any textile work, but I asked the question anyway. How would you feel about getting busy with your stuff? Actually, I think it might be good and relaxing after the day I've had. So that's just a little bit from the participants from Minecraft. If anyone's got any questions, please do get in touch using the Padlet and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Before I go completely, I have got another song for you. And if anyone would like to try out the music games that the lads used to play in the Minecraft workshops, there will be a suggested playlist on the Stitching Together Net website, I hope, and instructions on how to play the game. So I hope you enjoy our final song, and happy sewing, everyone. I just need to go and set this up.
Sarah, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. I think we've all really enjoyed that. Thank you. Fantastic. And now I am going to hand over to our next facilitator, Nicola Thomas. Nicola is in conversation this afternoon with another group of filmmakers. We have Emma Aurelia, who is joining us from Canada, Sarah Brown, whose work has been in Madagascar, and Lynn Setterington here in the UK, to talk about the films that they have made. Hopefully you've managed to see them on via the pre-recorded content on the website. All of these textile making projects depict textile making outside in very different landscapes. So Nicola, would you please like to say hello? And
hello everybody. Are you going to pin me?
We are. Let's find you. Here we go.
Great, thank you.
And Emma Aurelia, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I'm Emma Aurelia and I'm tuning in from Toronto in Canada. It's really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Emma. We have Lynn, wonderful, and Sarah.
Hello, I'm here.
And
hi everyone.
Oh, that's great. Looks like we're all pinned. And Emma, can I just check, should we keep with the 15 minutes or do you want to keep us with the scheduled time scale, which is a little bit late? How do you want me to work?
We have gone over by just 5 minutes, but keep to your 15-minute schedule. We'll trim down later on.
Okay, thank you. Oh, well, thank you everybody for being here, and to Emma and Lynn and Sarah. I just want to just say on the Padlet, people are just blown away by the films we've been able to witness from your work. It's privilege, beautiful, just very emotional. So thank you for sharing this work with us today. And our conversation is just going to be hopefully unpicking some of the kind of contexts which you've been working in, and some of your perspectives on working with film in craft. So Emma, you've already said hello, but do you want to just position yourself a little moment before we move into conversation?
Sure. So I'm an interdisciplinary artist. I work primarily with textiles, but I also am a musician, and I work in film as of late, and I work collaboratively also with dancers and in other kind of performance spaces as well.
Oh, thank you. Lynn.
Hi everybody. Yeah, my name's Lynn Setterington, and I'm a stitcher, academic kind of maker. I've been doing it for years and years. So it's kind of interesting kind of seeing how, there's been this opening up of wonderful stitching in all different ways. I work with all sorts of community groups as well as making my own textiles to commission kind of, and sort of, I initiate projects as well with different groups, mostly in the UK, mostly in the northwest of England, but not exclusively.
Amazing. Thank you, Lynn. And Sarah.
Hi there, my name's Sarah Brown. I'm coming to the end of my PhD. I'm a visual artist really, but I'm doing a sort of transdisciplinary PhD at the University of Bath, involving a sort of anthropological perspective about transitions of craft practice in Madagascar.
So I'm just really thrilled to bring these really beautiful evocations of landscape and the connection that we have to our craft practice as placed, connected to land, our ancestors, livelihoods, inspiration, passion, every day. It's all in these different films, the radical kind of potential of craft to kind of connect so many dimensions of our life worlds together. And there is something that's very interesting about the fact that you've all turned to film to witness and to document these practices. And I was really struck when Jessica kind of opened our discussion this morning about, this complementary connection between film and craft. And the thing I'm very curious about is what work film does within your craft practice. Why turn to film when you've got your wonderful process of making that you are all so deeply engaged with? But what is this extra dimension that films brings to this practice? And Emma, I turn to you first with Soft Walls, such a beautiful evocation of landscape weaving connection to kick us off.
Thank you. Yeah, so for me, I've turned to film because it really takes the work further from this association with functionality and utility that is so inherent in textile work. Working in film allows that record to be the work itself. And in a way, it's deprioritizing the physical object and emphasizing the process, which is difficult to do with the textile itself. And I've found that in making film the focal point, it's really actually reshaped the way that I think about weaving. And it's allowed me to consider this interesting dynamic between film being a time-based media and holding, and textile holding this impression of time, specifically hand-woven textiles and the process of making them being almost this time-bending experience from a making perspective, and then the physical object itself retaining that story. So I'm now looking at these two mediums together as time-bending, warping, storytelling devices, which I think is a really exciting lens for my future work.
Thank you. Oh, it's so interesting, this kind of hybrid intersection. Lynn, you take us to stitching this Bronte landscape, this deep participatory practice. So where did the filmmaking fit with you and the work that it was doing within this just huge project?
Yeah, it's something I've done a few times, just very kind of as a sort of, a method, a kind of process to kind of document the work in a different way. And with the Bronte one, it was a transitory, sort of installation. So it was only on the hillsides of Haworth for 2 weeks. So I wanted to kind of have a document that I could use beyond that time frame and share with other people. And also something of why I do the film, or I always document stuff myself through photography. But I kind of realised that a lot of the projects I do, the work goes back to the communities and the groups that I work with. So I don't have a physical record other than the photo. So I thought by making film, I've got some connection and I can then again share that idea. And also it's good to reflect back on and see, and it is that thing of also bringing other people's voices into it. So, it's my perspective because I've started the project, but then, what I've realised over the years is how rich it is because other people become involved and their sort of contribution to it is different. And, there's all these things that emerge that you hadn't expected. So being able to capture that, sort of in film is lovely, and then to share that with people across the world, because obviously, not everybody's going to be in Haworth for 2 weeks in October. So, but it's been shown, in loads of places, nationally and internationally. So that's, for me, it's kind of expanding sort of dissemination of the project mostly.
Yeah, and I really love the fact that, in both of those two projects, you witnessed the process of making differently through the film. And I was really struck when we saw the aerial footage of the stitched words. I thought, no one will have witnessed that unless you had the film. So that was really, really powerful moment to see those fields with the stitched words. Sarah, you just took us on this journey into Jacqueline's life world, which is extraordinary, and a really deep engagement with that life world. So the work of film within that life world, I'm curious also what difference it made to Jacqueline.
That's an interesting question. So I suppose Madame Jacqueline is somebody, the subject of the film is somebody who's very talented, and not just to us as outsiders, but locally lots of women can weave, but she's recognised as having quite exceptional skills. And she's very keen to share her knowledge. She feels this, I think she feels this deep importance. This is an ancestral practice. And she's aware more than anybody else that Madagascar doesn't have a loud voice on the world stage, particularly a woman from an isolated sort of rural community. And I don't think anybody from sort of outside her community had really engaged with her process, her everyday before. So it was a way for her to talk directly to the viewer, really. And actually by doing the film in Malagasy with English subtitles, then there is a film that is accessible to her community in a way that other sort of forms of academic modes of communicating and recording things wouldn't be. So really it's a way for her to speak not only to the wider world, but in a way that's understandable and relatively accessible locally.
Yeah, I thought that was a really powerful decolonizing act as well, to witness her life world through her voice and not mediate that in other ways. So yeah, I was really grateful to witness that. We've touched on issues around audience, and Sarah, you've just talked beautifully about the really critical importance of audience, which was present as you were filming that work. And when we make films, they're designed to be circulating, but Emma, you also kind of talk about the kind of intersection now that film is part of this process of you making sense of things. So to what extent is audience important, Emma, to you within these films, and whether who are you making your films for, I guess, or who did you make this film for?
Great question. Well, the actual activation of the three weavers working together was born of really a practical circumstance. I was doing a textile residency and working in a line of looms. So really it was made for us to try and stretch the boundaries of conventional weaving. That's really the root of it. But then as it grew to become something more and something of an outward expression, I feel like it's made for people who have a desensitization toward textiles and toward the process of weaving, and also to people who do understand the process, to challenge new ways of thinking about weaving and metaphors that are so potent in weaving and ideas around possible futures of collective labor. So I'd say that those are kind of two audiences that I've considered, those with background and understanding and those without that.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, really, really fascinating. And just moving into these diverse audiences, I guess, that our films are made for when we're documenting and working with our film within our projects. Then you've talked about the kind of the return to the audience that your film was able to do, or the return that your film was able to do to your participants. Mm-hmm. But what other elements of audience play a part when you're planning your film documentation? What other audiences kind of come in, which might be more practical or
yeah, I think I don't know. I think I made that when the film it kind of has its own force. Once it's made, it's interesting how it gets seen and shared in different ways that I always have not expected. And I think I love that kind of it resonates on different levels. So, for example, I sort of shared a little bit with Emma Liggins, who was in the film, who's lecturer in English at MMU where I teach, and then she asked, could I show it to my students studying English, because it's really important about this thing about women writers of the 19th century not having opportunity to sort of write under their own names, and just I'd never kind of considered that. So that wasn't my audience when I was thinking about it. It was to do with the Brontes, and that legacy was sort of to do with the Bronte Museum and taking it outside kind of, and that was interesting as well, because we had things like dog walkers and hikers kind of walking on the hills who saw the piece and then hopefully maybe connected to see it in a different way. So I think I'm always inspired by that. I start off with my agenda and my things, but I love the fact that it goes to different places and hopefully is appreciated by different audiences who hadn't expected to be interested. So yeah.
That's the total magic, isn't it? That's the total magic of putting something out in the world which you never know what life it's going to have. That's fantastic. Yeah. So Sarah, was the audience for a longer film and the decision to make a long film, which really is more of a documentary witnessing, what difference does the length and the kind of the style of film make to kind of audience for you?
One thing to note is that when you make a 20-minute documentary, whilst it's valuable, and I feel like local people would appreciate, this is a really important process locally, so they would appreciate a sort of deep dive into something. It's also very difficult to get it there. So the plan was to take this film back to Madagascar on a research trip. But because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to get it there. So ironically, having done that deep dive that I think local people would enjoy, I'm not able to send it because, you could email a short snippet, but you certainly, you could email a short snippet and get it sent to the village, but I can't send a documentary that long. So there's a sort of, there's been an unexpected barrier from the length of the film. Sort of accept it, which of course I didn't anticipate at the outset.
Well, that will no doubt get resolved as things unlink those pathways, because it is often actually that kind of where are the digital disconnects with how our participants and our audiences are able to get to our work. How do we reach the audience with our filmmaking? of our practice, which, yeah, it's part of the challenge, isn't it? And who knew the global pandemic would result in that for you? You know, that wasn't on the risk plan. So, well, that is the end of our 15-minute slot. And I just think it's just extraordinary to have been able to spend time with just these three films, these three filmmakers, such wonderful projects, clearly lots of love within the Padlet. Lynn, there is a question for you in the Padlet, which I'd love you to answer. And I was going to ask everybody their top tips for doing craft and film. So but we haven't had time. So maybe Emma, Sarah and Lynn, you could always pop your top tip underneath your film and people can enjoy that. So thanks very much.